Florida just got ranked the most vulnerable housing market in the United States. Not California, not New York, not Texas, Florida. ATTOM Data Solutions published their first quarter 2026 analysis, and the results aren't subtle. While most of the state is seeing flat movement or modest declines, 15 specific cities are experiencing home price drops between 9 and 30% inside a single 12-month window. Some of these markets were just 3 years ago the fastest appreciating zip codes in the country. Three things caused this, and they all arrived at roughly the same time. First, homeowners insurance. The average Florida premium hit $8,292 in 2025, an 18% increase in a single year. The state's insurer of last resort, Citizens Property Insurance, shed over 1 million policyholders in 24 months, dropping from 1.42 million policies in late 2023 to roughly 385,000 by the end of 2025. Every one of those displaced homeowners was pushed into the private market at significantly higher rates. Coastal and canal front properties pay more than the average, considerably more. Second, a condo reform law passed after the 2021 Surfside building collapse, the one that killed 98 people when a 12-story tower fell at 3 in the morning. That law banned the accounting maneuvers that had allowed condo associations to ignore their maintenance backlogs for decades. Starting January 2026, those bills came due. Special assessments of $50,000 to $400,000 per unit are now landing in mailboxes across the state. Owners who can't pay are selling. Buyers who know what's coming won't buy. Third, the people stopped arriving. Florida's net domestic migration peaked at 310,000 in 2022. By 2025, that number had fallen to 22,000, a 93% collapse. Florida dropped from 1st to 8th nationally in domestic migration in that window. The buyers who built the boom simply aren't showing up anymore. Every city on this list is running a version of that same story. The price points are different, the geography is different, the exact mechanism varies, but the outcome is the same. The math of owning property in Florida has broken for a significant portion of the buyer pool, and prices are correcting to close that gap. In some markets, that correction is measured. In others, it is severe enough that the price data reads like a post-disaster report rather than a cyclical adjustment. Here are 15 Florida cities where housing market is crashing June 2026. Cape Coral. Cape Coral was built on a canal grid, 210,000 residents, 400 miles of navigable waterways, making it the largest canal system city in the world. During the pandemic years, it was among the most searched zip codes in the country. Boaters, remote workers, retirees from the Northeast, they arrived simultaneously and pushed prices up fast. The waterfront lifestyle at a price point well below Miami or Naples was the pitch, and for several years it was a credible one. That same geography is now the liability. Canal front properties carry some of the highest flood and homeowners insurance premiums in the state. The exposure is structural. It's baked into the city's design. When the migration wave stopped and condo assessments arrived, Cape Coral didn't just slow down. ATTOM Data Solutions named it the worst housing market in the United States in the first quarter of 2026. Metro-wide median prices are down 9% year over year, with an additional 10% decline projected over the next 12 months. High unsold inventory, builders still finishing homes, and no incoming migration to absorb them. The boomtown dynamic ran in reverse. Fort Myers Beach. The steepest single-year price drop on this list belongs to Fort Myers Beach, 30.7% year over year, based on 44 closed sales through February 2026. The median sits at $580,000. That number requires context because the 30.7% figure isn't measuring a typical market correction. Hurricane Ian made a direct Category 4 landfall on Estero Island in September 2022, and the destruction was near total across this barrier island community of 6,000 permanent residents. What's selling now is a fractured mix: newly built hurricane-compliant homes priced at a premium, and storm-damaged structures or vacant lots priced at deep discounts. The median price drop reflects a market that was physically torn apart and is still being reassembled, not a uniform decline in a functioning housing environment. The financial math for new buyers remains difficult. High rebuild costs, elevated insurance premiums, and the knowledge that the next hurricane season is always 12 months away. The permanent residents who stayed and rebuilt made a commitment to the place that outside buyers simply haven't matched. For an outside buyer evaluating options from a distance, Fort Myers Beach demands a risk tolerance that most people, rationally, don't possess. Sanibel Island. Sanibel sits 12 miles off the Lee County coast, connected to the mainland by a single causeway. 2/3 of the island is a federally protected wildlife refuge. The beaches are ecologically distinct. The island's east-west orientation means shells accumulate along the shoreline at an unusual rate, which gave rise to the term the Sanibel Stoop. The permanent population is about 6,000. For decades, this was the kind of place that wealthy seasonal buyers purchased without requiring much justification. Hurricane Ian collapsed the connecting causeway in September 2022. The island rebuilt. Homeowners largely chose to repair and reconstruct rather than sell vacant lots. But the cost of insuring a rebuilt home on Sanibel is now high enough that affluent buyers are pausing in ways they never did before. Prices are down between 10.9 and 12.4% year over year, with Redfin and Zillow landing at slightly different figures, but both pointing in the same direction. The island hasn't changed. The ecology is intact. What changed is the financial calculation attached to ownership, storm-resistant construction costs, and insurance premiums that simply didn't exist at this level 5 years ago. Wealthy buyers aren't priced out. They're unconvinced. Naples. Naples has always been the counter-argument. When interest rates rise, buyers with cash don't need mortgages. That insulation made Naples the last market anyone expected to show up on a correction list. Port Royal, the luxury Gulfront neighborhood, the private golf clubs and gated estates that define the physical character of one of the wealthiest cities in the United States, with a permanent population of 20,000 that doubles during the winter season. The median home price in Naples is $1,200,000, down 9.6% based on 158 closed sales through March 2026. The all-cash buyer pool hasn't disappeared. It's become cautious in a way it hasn't been in recent memory. Affluent buyers are sitting on listings not because they can't afford to close, but because they've started calculating what comes after. Statewide insurance averaging over $8,000 annually, condo special assessments running into the 6 figures in older buildings, and HOA fees rising across the golf communities that define Naples' residential identity. When cash buyers have unlimited options and no urgency, they wait. Inventory accumulates. Listings sit longer than sellers are accustomed to. In Naples' case, that dynamic now shows up as a nearly 10% median price decline, which would have seemed implausible to most market observers just 2 years ago. Marco Island. 20 miles south of Naples, Marco Island presents the same dynamics at a slightly different price point. Typical home values sit at $897,000, down 5.8%. The single-family segment is holding better than the condominium segment, and that divergence is exactly where the story lives. Marco Island's high-rise condo stock was built predominantly between the 1970s and early 2000s. Those buildings are now over 30 years old. Senate Bill 4D requires structures of that age to fully fund structural reserves starting January 2026, and that funding requirement can't be waived. For prospective buyers on Marco Island, purchasing an older condominium unit now means accepting an unknown financial liability. The structural integrity reserve study hasn't come back yet, and when it does, the assessment number could range from manageable to devastating. In luxury segments elsewhere in the state, those assessments have exceeded $400,000 per unit. Wealthy buyers are capable of absorbing large costs. They're less willing to absorb large unknowns, so they wait, the listings accumulate, and prices move down to account for the uncertainty. Sarasota. If you want to see exactly what Senate Bill 4D is doing to the Florida housing market, Sarasota County provides the clearest data split available. Single-family homes down 5.2% year over year based on 812 closed sales. Condominiums down 19.5% in the same period. That nearly 15 percentage point gap between the two segments is almost entirely the product of the condo reserve mandate. Longtime owners in older buildings, many of them fixed-income retirees who bought in the 90s and early 2000s, are now being handed special assessments between $50,000 and $200,000 per unit, with some luxury properties receiving assessments exceeding $400,000. These are people who planned their retirement finances around a specific monthly cost of living. The assessment wasn't in that plan. They can't stay, and they can't find buyers willing to step into the same liability, so the condo market has gone largely illiquid. The single-family market, sitting right next to all of this, is declining moderately but remains functional. Sarasota County includes Siesta Key, Venice, and outer Northport. Enough geographic range that the single-family segment has sufficient buyer variety to keep functioning while the condo market freezes. One law created two completely different outcomes within the same county and the same calendar year. Bonita Springs. Bonita Springs sits in Lee County between Naples and Fort Myers, surrounded by gated golf communities, Bonita Bay Club, Pelican Landing, Highland Woods, the estuary at Gray Oaks. The retirement lifestyle here is built on shared infrastructure: golf courses, tennis facilities, pools, security gates, landscaping, all of it funded by HOA assessments. The median home price is $565,000, down 7.1% based on 284 closed sales through February 2026. The price decline is real, but the more instructive number is what's happened to the HOA fees that define life inside these communities. The commercial insurance policies covering shared infrastructure have risen sharply statewide, and associations pass those costs directly to residents through monthly dues. The amenities haven't improved. The fee is higher. For a retirement model that was always premised on delivering lifestyle value in exchange for a monthly payment, that equation is now running in reverse. Retirees who built retirement budgets around what those monthly assessments were when they bought in are now managing costs that have moved past their projections. Prospective buyers are running the same calculation before closing and deciding the value proposition doesn't work at current prices. Buyer demand dropped and the price is adjusting to close the gap. Fort Myers. Fort Myers is not a beach community or a golf enclave. It's the working city at the center of Lee County. Hospitals, government offices, schools, the Edison and Ford Winter Estates along the Caloosahatchee River, a historic downtown with remaining streetcar tracks. This is where the regional economy actually operates, sitting across the river from Cape Coral. Median home price, $340,000, down 10.2% overall, with the downtown corridor specifically down 13.7% year over year. Three separate forces converge simultaneously. Hurricane Ian's recovery costs still working their way through the system, aging riverfront condominium towers facing mandatory SB4D structural assessments, and our regional migration collapse that removed the buyers who were supposed to fill new construction and rehabilitated historic buildings. Fort Myers doesn't have the cash buyer cushion of Naples or the luxury branding of Marco Island. When the demand side weakens in a working urban market, the pricing adjustment is faster and the correction becomes visible in the transaction data quickly. Tampa. From 2020 to 2022, the Tampa-St. Petersburg-Clearwater metropolitan area added more new residents per capita than any other top 20 metro in the United States. It was unambiguously the fastest growing major metro in the country during those years, home to over 3.3 million people across Hillsborough, Pinellas, and surrounding counties. That run ended. Typical home values are now down between 4.8 and 6% year over year. The Case-Shiller Tampa Price Index sits off 3.9%. Those numbers are moderate compared to others on this list, but there's a data point inside the metro analysis that carries more weight than the headline price change. Of 43 major American metros examined, Tampa had the steepest HOA fee increases in the country, up 17.2% year over year in the period ending July 2024. That figure reveals something about what's happening regionally. It's not just home prices adjusting. It's the ongoing monthly cost of living within these communities rising faster than residents expected when they bought in. The single-family housing segment in Hillsborough County has shown relative resilience, but the Pinellas County barrier islands are under more acute pressure, and the condo sector carries significant SB4D exposure across the metro. Bradenton. Bradenton is a city of about 60,000 people on the Manatee River, just north of Sarasota. During the peak migration years, national builders including D.R. Horton, Lenner, and Polt all expanded their local operations substantially, betting on sustained population growth along the Gulf Coast corridor. The median home price is $320,000, down 8.6% based on 74 closed sales through February 2026. The builders are still building. Construction is completing on schedule. Open houses are reporting low attendance. abundance. Unsold inventory is rising. Because major home builders are sensitive to holding costs, they discount aggressively to move product. When a builder reduces the price on the new home at the end of the street, it pulls down the comparable value of every home a peak-era buyer already closed on. That's the mechanical outcome of a high-supply, low-demand environment. The buyers who purchased in 2021 and 2022 are absorbing the difference between what they paid and what the market is currently willing to bear. Northport. Welland Park is an 8,000-acre master-planned community inside Northport in southern Sarasota County, designed to absorb the coastal overflow and pandemic-era migration that was reshaping Southwest Florida's population map. Developer Madeira Homes built at scale, with construction timelines calibrated to an assumed continuation of the inbound population wave. The typical home value in Northport sits at $318,000, down 9.3% year over year. Prices that climbed from $200,000 in 2019 to over $350,000 at the peak are reversing. The migration wave slowed before the master plan's inventory was absorbed, and large-scale residential developments don't have an off switch once grading and framing are underway. The result is a supply overhang that the available regional buyer pool can't clear at prices the builders need to recover their investment. Welland Park has real infrastructure, new homes, community amenities, planned commercial space. The problem is scale. It was built for a demand driver that decelerated faster than the construction schedule did, and the price index is now reflecting that gap. Ocala. This one catches people off guard, and that reaction is exactly the story. Ocala sits 80 miles northwest of Orlando, well inland from the Gulf Coast. It's the equestrian capital of the world. Thoroughbred farms with prestigious bloodlines, large agricultural parcels, rolling north-central terrain. The permanent population is about 65,000. For years, Ocala was the answer financial planners, real estate agents, and retirement forums gave to the question of how to escape Florida's coastal insurance premiums. Move inland, get away from the storm zones, save money on coverage. For retirees specifically, it represented a way to access Florida's climate and lifestyle without paying Florida's coastal carrying costs. Ocala's housing market is now down 7.2% year over year. The reason exposes a structural feature of Florida's insurance market that most buyers never fully understood. The statewide pool redistributes risk across all properties, not just the ones closest to the water. When coastal claims surged, premiums rose statewide, including in Ocala, 80 miles from the nearest beach. The inland protection that buyers were counting on was an assumption about how insurance pricing worked that turned out to be incorrect. Add elevated mortgage rates on top of properties priced during the low-rate era, and the financial case for buying in Ocala stops closing for a meaningful share of incoming buyers. The inland safe haven narrative had genuine validity for a long time. The insurance market changed, and the narrative didn't update fast enough. Lehigh Acres. Lehigh Acres was platted in the 1950s across thousands of acres of scrubland in Lee County, one of the largest speculative subdivisions ever laid out in the United States, covering terrain that had no particular development logic beyond cheap land and optimistic projections. For decades, it served as the discount valve for buyers priced out of Cape Coral and Fort Myers. Entry-level homes, modest lots, affordable by the standards of the surrounding coastal markets. Median home values in the primary zip codes are declining at 8.3 to 8.8% year over year, settling into the range of $283,000 to $292,000. During the pandemic boom, builders filled Lehigh Acres with 2- and 3-bedroom single-family homes aimed at buyers being squeezed out of the coast. When that overflow demand dried up, builders were left holding inventory they couldn't move at the prices they needed, so they started discounting. When builder discounts pull prices down, every owner who bought at peak pricing absorbs the loss. Lehigh Acres was always affordable relative to its neighbors. Now it's the affordable end of a declining regional market, which is a different kind of affordable entirely. Port Charlotte. Port Charlotte is where the human stakes of this correction become most direct. This unincorporated community of 60,000 residents in Charlotte County was built around a specific promise. You could retire here on Social Security and a modest pension and afford to stay. Not luxury, not resort living, just functional, stable retirement in a warm climate with access to Charlotte Harbor. For decades, working-class retirees who couldn't afford Naples or Fort Myers found in Port Charlotte a genuinely viable option at a price point that fit fixed incomes. The median home price is $246,000, down 11.6% based on 117 closed sales through January 2026. The price decline isn't the primary story. The primary story is what's happening to people who are already there. Pandemic-era price appreciation pushed home values well past their historical relationship to local incomes and retirement budgets. Then insurance premiums rose. Then property taxes followed. For residents living on fixed incomes, Social Security checks, small pensions, carefully managed savings, the carrying costs of homes they already own are now exceeding what they planned for when they moved in. Spec builders have excess inventory they can't sell. The buyers who would normally cycle into the market as older residents move on are looking elsewhere because ownership costs have moved beyond what a modest retirement income will support. There is no luxury premium here to absorb the correction and no affluent buyer pool to step in at reduced prices. The market that was designed to be the most accessible has become one of the most financially exposed. Treasure Island and Madeira Beach. On September 26, 2024, Hurricane Helene made landfall along the Gulf Coast. 13 days later, on October 9th, Hurricane Milton followed. Both storms hit the same Pinellas County Barrier Island communities in direct succession. Two major hurricanes targeting the same narrow strip of land between Boca Tierra Bay and the Gulf of Mexico within a 2-week window. Treasure Island, with a permanent population of about 7,000, recorded a median home price decline of 21.2%. Madeira Beach, population 4,000, saw a 23.6% drop. The combined monthly transaction volume for both markets under normal conditions runs between 15 and 25 home sales. Sample sizes that small create statistical volatility, but the direction is consistent across every major valuation platform that tracks these zip codes. What two back-to-back storms in 13 days introduced to these communities is something that had no practical application in Florida real estate 5 years ago. Properties that are functionally uninsurable and, as a result, unmortgageable. No insurer willing to write a policy means no lender willing to write a mortgage. No mortgage means the only viable buyer is cash, and a cash buyer with options isn't paying full market value for a barrier island property in an active and repeatedly demonstrated storm corridor. The word uninsurable used to appear in theoretical discussions about extreme risk scenarios. On the barrier islands of Pinellas County right now, it's appearing in listing descriptions. The homes haven't disappeared. The beach is still there. The dual waterfront access between the Gulf and Boca Tierra Bay is the same as it's always been. What's changed is that a meaningful segment of the housing inventory on these islands no longer has a functioning financial pathway to sale. 15 markets, 3 converging forces, the same basic outcome at price points running from $246,000 in Port Charlotte to $1.2 million in Naples. What the data shows collectively is that Florida's housing market spent roughly 5 years absorbing a massive demand wave without pricing in the cost of sustaining what that demand created. Insurance exposure wasn't priced in. Decades of deferred condo maintenance weren't priced in. The assumption that migration would hold at peak levels was never seriously stress tested. When all 3 of those assumptions broke within the same 12-month window, the correction that followed wasn't cyclical, it was structural. Cyclical corrections reverse when the cycle turns. Structural corrections don't reverse until the underlying cost structure changes. Lenders in the hardest hit markets are now absorbing immediate losses on distressed properties rather than carrying the insurance and maintenance costs associated with prolonged foreclosure proceedings. That's not a normal lending posture. It signals that the institutions with the most direct financial exposure have concluded that conditions have shifted in a way that isn't reversing quickly and that waiting carries more risk than cutting losses now. Several of these markets are still in early stages of the correction. The first full round of SB 4D assessments is only beginning to reach unit owners across the state. Insurance premiums haven't stabilized. Net domestic migration to Florida hasn't recovered to a level that would meaningfully reduce the inventory overhang in supply-heavy markets like Bradenton, Northport, and Lehigh Acres. Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel Island are still working through recovery timelines measured in years, not months. Florida isn't an unattractive state. The climate is real. The retirement infrastructure is real. The Gulf Coast still looks the same in January as it always has. What's changed is the financial structure sitting beneath the surface. The question for any prospective buyer isn't whether Florida remains desirable. It's whether the specific property in the specific market at the specific asking price can actually be owned sustainably once insurance, taxes, and association fees are added to the monthly ledger. In these 15 cities, that question is currently being answered by declining transaction volumes and downward price adjustments. The answer isn't settled yet.